Hey, welcome into the REVO Church Podcast. This is spiritual disciplines. If you've clicked on that video, then you know what they are because hopefully you've been rolling with us. We have talked all about Bible reading, Bible study. We've talked about prayer. We've talked about serving. We've talked about worship. We've even gave you a definition and defined what spiritual disciplines are. So if you missed any of those, if you're curious about them, hey, pause this video and go watch them because I'm going to be honest with you, I think they're all pretty good. So you should go watch them. You should go see what spiritual disciplines are, help to understand them. Because what a spiritual discipline is, they are a mechanism that helps us get closer or learn more about Jesus, to help us grow in our relationship to Jesus. They do not get us to Jesus because, hey, as humans, we can't get to God. That's why Jesus had to come to us. But they are ways that we can use to grow a little closer in our relationship with them. And so each one helps us do that. And today, we're actually going to be talking about fasting. And so I'm here. I'm joined with Pastor Nathan Klein himself, lead pastor at REVO. If you don't know Nathan's one of the most down-to-earth guys I've ever met. I know when I called him Pastor Nathan, he cringed a little bit because he's just Nathan. He loves to do that. But Nathan, I got to ask, how are you feeling? Are you excited to be on here?
I think it's extremely ironic that the chubbiest guy on the team gets asked to talk about fasting. So I'm really, really looking forward to being here with you today.
Listen, don't take it as a sign. Just take it as we believe in you. But when we're talking about fasting, we're gonna focus our conversation on the Bible because that's where we get our guidance. And Matthew chapter 6 says this about fasting. Matthew 6, 16 to 18. He said, when you fast, this is Jesus speaking, when you fast, do not look sullen like the hypocrites, for they make their faces unattractive so that people will see them fasting. I tell you the truth, they have their reward. When you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others when you're fasting, but only to your Father who's in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, I'm going to be straight with you. When I think about fasting, my mind goes in two places. It has always went in two places. My mind on fasting first goes to food, because, you got to give up food. Get rid of that McDonald's burger. And then my fasting goes to a second location of Lent, the season prepping up to Easter. And so when I think about fasting, I've always thought about food and Easter. So is that the only time we see fasting? Is that the only thing that's important?
Well, I think you're already a step ahead of most people is you're thinking about fasting. Because if you notice in that text, it says, Jesus said, when you fast. He didn't say if you fast, or like if you'd like to, or occasionally, like some people do it, but some people don't. And so it's cool if you don't. Like when he said that, there was an assumption that followers of Jesus fast. And so the fact that you were like, hey, when I think of fasting, I think of two things. I think you're probably ahead of most Christians. I know you're ahead of where I was when I first started in ministry as well and first started following Jesus. But there is an assumption that it is going to be a spiritual discipline that followers of Jesus fast. And so we can talk about the why behind that, but I think we got to talk about like there's an expectation.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think if you're a part of maybe the Catholic Church, you do Lent, and that's a big deal, and Ash Wednesday, and that those might be times when you do that. I've met Christians that fast. That essentially it was a diet plan. And it's just like, I feel like shaving 5 pounds off. I need to lose 10 pounds. So let's spiritualize it and like let's just give up some food.
Let's make our diet look spiritual.
Yeah, and even intermittent fasting, it's become a buzzword now amongst the fitness culture.
It's constant. It's everywhere.
Yep.
I have cousins that are real big in the intermittent fasting, and they're like, "You need to try this," and I'm like, I like food. Yeah.
And so I think the purpose behind the fasting, like understanding it's not a diet, it's not just something that the whole team does. During Lent, our staff team does Lent fasting, and we go through books, and it's to get our minds focused. We give something up.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the first assumption that Jesus makes, which I think is important for us to realize, is as followers of Jesus, fasting is going to be a discipline of ours.
I think it's expected. Like you said, it's not a should you do it or should you think about it. It was he expected us to fast. So I guess then the question crops up, if we're expected to do it, well, what is fasting? And then outside of what is it, why should we fast?
When people ask me what is fasting, I like to give the analogy. It's a story that I've preached from out of the book of Matthew when Jesus and his disciples, he sends the disciples out, and there's a father that has a kid that needs healing.
Yeah.
And this guy is desperate. He brings the child to the disciples and asks the disciples to heal this kid. The disciples, despite having the power of Jesus and being sent out by Jesus, they can't do it. And extremely frustrating to them. Well, the man brings the child to Jesus and said, I asked your disciples to do this, but they couldn't. And Jesus has a very interesting remark. It seems kind of harsh, like he rebukes them in public. And he looks out and he says, you wicked and perverse generation. And he kind of gets on them for not being able to do what he told them that they could do the whole time. And Jesus heals him, of course. Spoiler alert, Jesus can do anything. The disciples get frustrated at that. So they come back to Jesus after everyone goes home and they're like, hey, hold up. Why couldn't we do that? And Jesus makes a very powerful statement that I think is a statement that should be red blinking lights on the dashboard of our spiritual lives. He said, there are some things that will only happen as a result of prayer and fasting.
Yeah.
You will never see fasting in Scripture, the mandate of it, outside of prayer. And so those two things go hand in hand. So if you want to know why fasting is an absolute necessity, Jesus makes it clear. There's some things that you're praying about. There's some things that you want to see God do in your life. And you've been praying and you're giving and you're serving and you're going to church and you're reading your Bible and you're praying some more. He said some things will only move when you begin to fast and call out to God. So there's this idea. He gives the problem. He says you're a perverse generation and you're an unbelieving generation and you're a perverse generation. So those two things in Matthew 17 and 18 here, he not only gives the problem for why some of the things that we're not seeing in our life move, but he gives the solution. The solution to a perverse and an unbelieving generation is prayer and fasting. Yeah. And I brought a little prop with me. Can I?
Absolutely. I'd love to see it.
This is kind of like the way that I like to describe it. This is a surge protector. The solution to an unconnected life with God, an unbelieving life, is essentially a surge protector that's not plugged in.
Yep.
This does no good until it's plugged into the power source.
That will not charge my tablet.
No, we can stare it, we can rub it together, like you can plug it in here, but if this is not plugged in, then there's no power source. Yep. So what Jesus was saying is, hey guys, because you're an unbelieving generation, you're not connected to God. You can't figure out why this red light won't turn on and why nothing charges and nothing changes in your life. Well, you're not praying, you're not connected with God. But then he says, once you connect with God, if I plug this into the wall, I still can't just rub it on your iPad.
Yeah, it's still not gonna, nothing.
Still nothing's gonna happen.
Nothing.
But here's what fasting does. When we get connected with God and we plug this into the wall, here's what happens in our life. I know it happens in your life. Man, I get busy.
Yep.
And I realize every one of these plugs in my life is already filled. I got family and I got work and I've got recreation activities, and I've got my free time, and I've got some others, like I said, I got some side hustles here. I've got parenting that I'm trying to do, and I'm plugged in, I'm praying to God, but all of the plugs are filled. And the perverse generation means they're plugged in and into the world, and like so many things are dominating their time. And so God says, not only do you have to be connected to the source through prayer, but like there's some things in your life that you need to unplug so that God can plug in.
So he can fill.
Man, I'm worried that God might have an opportunity for you, but you're looking at your life right now and you're like, God, I can't handle anymore. Yeah. There's nowhere to plug. I'm so busy. God may open up a door and you're like, God, like, nah, close that door, man. I don't have time to walk through that. I don't have the energy to walk through that. I don't have the finances to do that. Man, can you imagine God having something for your life and you having to tell God no? Wow. You don't have time. You don't have the energy. I don't have the effort, because every one of these plugs is filled already. What fasting does is it disconnects us from the world so that we essentially hand this to God and say, God, whatever you want to plug in, however you want to move, whatever you want to do, however you want to use my life, all 6 of these plugs are open. Yeah. So I'm going to remove those things, disconnect from the world, and connect with God through prayer and fasting. And man, like this right here is unlimited potential.
Yep.
Man, you get this plugged into the wall and give me 6 outlets. We can power a lot. We can do a lot with this right here, but only if we're willing to connect with God and then disconnect, clear these out, disconnect from the world. That's how I like to do prayer and fasting. Jesus said there are some things that you want to do that will only be accomplished if you do those two things.
I like that. I love that example talking about, I think a lot of people, when they think of fasting, I think they make it where it's like, I have to cut out this and I have to cut out this and I have to stop this and I can't do this. And they get so wrapped up in what they're not able to do that they miss the whole point of it. The whole point of fasting is not I'm going to disconnect because I'm going to punish myself over this season. It's, I want to hear from God. And so I'm going to take the things out that are distracting me.
Yep.
And so for some people, that is stuff like social media. Right. That's every time me and Casey fast. That's one of the things we fast. We will fast social media because we're like, all right, this is distracting us from God. This is taking our time. We want to hear from God. Maybe it's, some people it's food. Some people it's hanging around people or TV or whatever is pulling you away or taking your time. I love that. I love that example. So talking about fasting, and hopefully the answer is yes.
Oh, no.
Has there been a time or times in your life where you have purposefully fasted and like, what did you experience? What did you see from that? Like, how did you see God working when you made time to actually sit down and fast?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the time that I do it every year is during Lent, and our staff team does it. We go through a book together. And the whole purpose behind that is like Easter is coming.
Yep.
And so I want my mind and heart to be focused and ready for the Easter message.
Yeah.
And man, as a pastor, as a Christian even, man, the spring is so busy. There's so many things going on in our life. And so, man, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to just roll up on Easter Sunday and it be the first time that I think about what Jesus has done for me.
Yep.
And so when I begin to disconnect from those things, and I've done food, I've done social media like you, I've done news outside of social media, like other media outlets, entertainment, like eliminated those things so that I can really get focused. And man, that Easter season becomes so much more meaningful to me.
Yeah.
So much intention and focus is spent preparing my heart. And man, just to be able to connect with God in that way and really soak in the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, it's so important to me. Advent's the same way, like leading up to Jesus's birth. Christmas, December can be so crazy and so hectic.
Family all the time. It's,
and not even bad things, man. Like those are good things.
Stuff. I love seeing my family. I love my sisters. I love my nieces and nephews.
Yeah, some of them.
No, if you see this, I love you all. They're great. It's a little hectic. Time gets crazy. Plans of when are we meeting? Where are we meeting? What time are we meeting? What food are we having? It gets crazy.
Yep. So the great thing about what you said about the idea of fasting is the sacrifice. When you sacrifice food, all of a sudden you realize, hey, you've got 30 minutes that you used to eat breakfast, an hour over lunch, and an hour over dinner. Now all of a sudden you got 2.5 hours of your day.
Yep.
And sometimes people will say, man, I'm just so busy. I don't have time I wish that I had more time so that I could. Fasting produces some time in your life that like, I just found you 2 hours of your day. Now, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to connect with God? Are you going to spend time in his word? Are you going to spend time in prayer? So it opens things up. Yeah.
For me, there's been a couple times in my life. I've fasted over the Easter season, prepping for Easter, being part of REVO, being on staff at REVO, I have done that. But there's been a couple intentional times that I've fasted in my life. One example that I fasted was when I was in school, I got an offer to work at a summer camp. And when I had that offer, I was going to Bible college. I was a freshman going into my sophomore year of Bible college. I got this offer of, hey, we want you to be our student pastor at the camp. Come work at the summer camp during the summer as well. Like, sounded great on paper, like amazing idea. But I sat back and I said, okay, this is a big turning point. Let me see, like, is this something God's calling me to do? Or is this just a door that's open that I'm not supposed to? And so when that position was offered for the next 3 weeks, and this isn't me bragging, I'm not special, don't take it as that, but the next 3 weeks, every time at lunch, I was still working summer camp because I was offered the position during the summer. I would ask my leaders, I made sure my counselors were okay with me doing this because we had 30 some middle schoolers. I didn't want to just step out and be like, oh, it's chaos, Lord of the Flies. But I asked my counselors, they were good. And every day for lunch for 3 weeks, I would purposefully leave. I'd walk down to the lake and I would just spend that time praying, asking God, if this is what you want, then make it completely obvious. Like, close every other door in my life and make me see this. If it's not what you want, like, close the door, slam it shut. And in that time, I realized, hey, this is where God's calling me. And so there's been times where I've fasted during like the Lent season, but I've also fasted a lot when I've come up on these big decisions. Yep. Casey goes to grad school at Wake Forest. And the whole time we were trying to figure out, what does she want to do? What school is she being called to? Where should she be going? We were fasting during those times because we were seeking God, because we're saying, okay, God, this is a big turning point in our life. Like, show us the right way to go.
Yep.
And I've heard you say it, like, if you want to hear from God, if you want to hear God, you have to abide with God. You have to be with him.
Definitely.
And part of being with him is disconnecting or taking out things that are distracting you. And so when I think about fasting, that's always been my thoughts on it. Is I've never made fasting a very like, this is the day I'm fasting. Every month, this day, I've never made it like that. Fasting has always been something is coming up. There's a big decision that needs to be made, or just I feel like I need some guidance from the Lord in these manners.
Yep.
And so then I've made that an intentional time of saying, okay, let me pull back from some things that I'm doing and let me see what God is doing.
And there's biblical precedents for that. Moses did that. David did that. Jesus did that. Peter did that. It seemed like any critical moment in their life where they were making a big decision or needed clarity from God, all of that was prefaced by a time of getting away and fasting. So you got good biblical ground for that.
Hopefully. But so to close out, as we're wrapping up this episode, there's people here that maybe they are hearing of fasting. Maybe it's not the first time they've heard of fasting. Like, maybe they've heard of it before, but they've never actually questioned the idea of should I fast? Maybe your example, you pulled the surge protector and they stopped and they realized, wait, I've been praying and praying and praying and praying, but I'm not listening to God. I haven't disconnected anything. Maybe that's hitting them. What would be some advice you would give someone if they said, I want to start fasting?
Yeah, I think understanding that fasting is a discipline, right? Nobody wants to do it. Our bodies are designed to be self-centered, self-absorbed, self-focused.
Yep.
And so anytime you deny yourself of something, yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a struggle. There's going to be some failure involved in it in some way. But don't let the fact that it's a discipline scare you away. Sometimes things have to start as a discipline before they become a desire and then move to a delight. Like, my goal would be that fasting would be a delight of yours because, like you said, you hear from God, feel connected with God, get clarity from God. But the reality is, oftentimes it doesn't start as a delight. It just starts as a discipline. So just make the decision, hey, I'm going to incorporate fasting into my life. Start small, whether it's one meal on a Monday and you're going to spend that time in prayer. You don't have to do like a water fast for 45 days.
You don't have to do what was it? Water and oranges? Was that the David or the Daniel fast?
Yeah, whatever, fruit and vegetables only and just water. Like, start small and just develop that discipline for it. And identify the why behind it. I struggled early on because it was like, I want to lose weight. I want to be spiritual. I need something from God. And so fasting became my way of like grabbing God and pulling his arm behind his back and forcing him to give me all the secrets of the world. It never worked. And so if that's your motive, then you're going to quit because it's not going to work. But the desire just to know God more, to be with God, to abide in him, John 15:5, those that abide in me can do anything, but apart from me, you can do nothing. The desires of your heart behind the fasting, I think God sees that, and that will absolutely determine the success and what you actually get out of it as you develop this new spiritual discipline.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. I think that's good stuff. I think when it comes to fasting, know why you're doing it, because like you said, it's and no one wants to do hard things. No one wants to do things that are going to cost things. And so if you know why, if you know, if your purpose is to see God clearer and to get closer to him, and you keep that in your mind as you're going, I think it doesn't make it easier, but it makes it bearable and it makes it doable. And then, like you said, it goes from I have to do it to, oh man, I get to do it to I'm walking with God every day. It's the beauty of it. And so I love that. I I'm so glad you joined us today. This was episode 7, almost said 6, 7 of Spiritual Disciplines. We were talking about fasting. We'll see you in the next episode.